All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I would like to call this meeting of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety to order. I'm Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and Chairwoman of the committee. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, and the time is 10:02 a.m. We are conducting this meeting in person in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and streaming on the DC Council's website and YouTube and X at @CM Brooke Pinto. Today is a reconvening of yesterday's meeting that we recessed yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m. We have a quorum today of all of our committee members. At-large Councilmember Kenyon McDuffie, Ward 6 Councilmember Charles Allen, Ward 7 Councilmember Wendell Felder, and at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds. We have one matter on today's agenda: the approval of the committee's fiscal year 2026 budget report and recommendations. I'll begin by providing a brief overview of the committee's recommendations, and then we'll be moving an amendment, and then we will have discussion and any questions that members have, and then we will vote on the dais print. This report was developed after months of hearings, testimony, meetings, and other forms of public engagement. The report reflects the committee's commitment to safety, justice, and sustainable peace through all of our district communities. The committee recognizes that the district faces acute budgetary constraints this year due to a number of factors, including the widespread impact on the cuts of the federal workforce, congressional actions requiring cuts to the district's local budget, and a lagging commercial property tax valuations. Nevertheless, the committee's recommendations demonstrate and maintain DC's commitment to enhance public safety and justice with investments we've made across our public safety ecosystem. Because the committee report makes quite a few recommendations, I've tried to keep descriptions as concise as possible, leaving the lengthier descriptions to the committee report itself. I'll briefly describe these investments, which aim to accomplish three goals. First, interrupt cycles of violence and support underserved residents. Second, meet urgent public safety needs and support our public safety workforce. And third, bolster foundational needs to provide for safe and thriving communities. This budget, as proposed by the committee and the amendment that I'm moving today, interrupts cycles of violence and supports underserved residents by merging the district's violence interruption program, now under the Office of the Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, to improve efficiency and efficacy of our VI programs with an investment of $11.1 million in violence interruption in FY 2026. Investing $4.9 million in FY 26 and over $18 million across the financial plan in the Pathways program to better support and follow through for job training and permanent job placement for individuals at risk of participating in or becoming victims of gun violence. We're supporting $12.4 million for access to justice to provide civil legal service to disadvantaged and vulnerable residents, supporting $3.9 million enhancements across the financial plan for OAG's litigation support fund to ensure OAG can carry forward their crucial missions of supporting and protecting district residents and interests, supporting $52.6 million for victim services grants at the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants to support victims, survivors, and service providers, funding the Unified Juvenile Justice System Plan as required by the Recidivism Reduction Oversight and Accountability for DYRS, otherwise referred to as the ROAD Act. This will require the executive to create a plan for a unified juvenile justice system. Investing $19.8 million in justice grants at OVSJG to provide support for returning citizens and those at risk of becoming justice system involved. Supporting MPD's capacity to implement the Second Chance Amendment Act, which allows for criminal record sealing to provide a clean slate and fair shot at employment, housing, and opportunities to contribute to folks' communities. This budget allows us to meet our urgent public safety needs and support our public safety workforce by funding the total amount of funds requested from the Metropolitan Police Department while identifying operational savings and enhancing the capital budget by $2.5 million to include funding for improvements at the training academy facility and support recruitment and hiring efforts at MPD. Supporting $2.4 million, including a one-time enhancement of $1 million for the police and fire clinic to provide occupational and preventative medical services to the district's over 6,000 police officers, firefighters, U.S. Park police officers, and U.S. Secret Service agents. This investment will also allow the clinic to begin to provide cancer and cardiac screenings. $2.3 million to pay for pay raises and bonuses, 911 and 311 call taker, dispatcher, and staff pay raises in order to remain competitive with the region and compensate these public safety workers for the difficulty of the work performed by our first responders. Approving $90.4 million for the fire and EMS facilities, equipment, including a new fire boat, vehicle replacement, firefighting safety gear, generator replacement, and station relocation. $13.7 million in OUC hardware and software IT improvements to ensure the district's emergency response and communication center maintains the state-of-the-art and best-in-class mobile data computer upgrades, 911 call processing, and electrical configurations to ensure accurate, fast, and reliable emergency first response. And supporting former government employees and current public safety agencies by allowing our retired MPD officers and firefighters to get rehired full-time or part-time at OUC or the Department of Forensic Sciences without jeopardizing their retirement benefits. And finally, this budget bolsters foundational needs to provide for safe and thriving communities by funding $9.1 million for the Safe Passage Program and funding the Safe Passage Training and School Engagement Amendment Act of 2025 to improve training and engagement among ambassadors and our schools, increasing the amount of child support that the district passes through to families from $150 to $200 for families currently receiving temporary assistance for needy families, otherwise known as TANF benefits, allocating just over $2 million for the Safe Commercial Corridor grants to provide resources for neighborhood-specific safety interventions and promote public safety along commercial corridors in all 8 wards. We're providing $1 million in safe and secure DC nonprofit grants to provide resources to respond to safety concerns at our city's nonprofit institutions who are at higher risk of violence or attacks, including hate crimes, and supporting access to public restrooms by transferring $200,000 in FY26 and $800,000 across the financial plan to the Committee on Public Works and Operations to support public restrooms in DuPont Circle and near Martin Luther King Jr. Library. Thank you very much to my colleague, Councilmember McDuffie, for transferring $500,000 for victim services to the Committee for Service Providers to continue their crucial operations, and to Councilmember Louis George for transferring $100,000 to Access to Justice. I want to thank Councilmember Parker for transferring $100,000 to implement the executive's requirement of the Road Act to execute a plan for a unified juvenile justice system. I also want to thank Councilmember Fruman for his contribution to raise the pass-through amount for TANF recipients. Turning to the Budget Support Act, the committee provided comments in the various subtitles that referred to the committee. I want to highlight a few of those subtitles. For Title I, Subtitle A, Limitations on Liability Against the District, the committee proposes raising the unliquidated damages cap from $500,000 to $750,000 for claims against the district in an effort to aim at more equitably high number and to remove the 2 provisions in Section 1003 and 1004, which would have limited recovery and evidence that would have made it difficult to recover if a plaintiff were injured by a district vehicle on an emergency run. I think these are a matter of fairness, and we'll continue to work with the full council to raise the cap or to lift the cap. Title III, Subtitle B, the Public Services Hotel Occupancy Fee. This subtitle would levy a tax on occupied hotel rooms in the district to 80 cents per room or suite rental per night. These revenues are then deposited into a new special purpose revenue fund that can only be used to pay for OUC costs necessary to provide the 911 and 311 services of the city. The mayor's proposed budget funds 52 dispatchers, FTEs, with $6 million in local funds generated by this special purpose revenue fund. Although we have concerns, and we've heard concerns from the Hotel Association when a version of this subtitle was proposed last year, we were not able to come up with the funding to replace that, and so we will keep that BSA subtitle in place. I'm now going to move an amendment, and we'll speak to that amendment. So I believe in and have always believed in violence interruption in our city and the ability, when implemented correctly, to save lives and really change the landscape of how our city can move forward with public safety in a sustainable manner. I think it is an extremely powerful program. And after many months and years of public engagement and oversight with the violence interruption programs in the district, both at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and at the Office of Attorney General, I and my colleagues have heard resounding calls to merge these programs and to have one violence interruption program in the district. And I want to acknowledge that there have been significant past deficiencies in performance and service delivery at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, which is why my initial proposal that we were going to vote on yesterday sought to merge the violence interruption programs within the Office of the Attorney General. But it was met with wide concern from literally all of my Judiciary member colleagues, concern from the mayor about dissolving ones, both functionally and symbolically, concerns from the Attorney General about their capacity to exclusively manage the district's VI programming. And I maintain my position that violence interruption programs should be merged into one program to achieve greater success, to drive down crime and support individuals who are at highest risk of gun violence swiftly, effectively, and efficiently. And so over the last several hours, together with the mayor, the committee is committed to merging the district's violence interruption programs, but under the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And I want to sincerely thank the mayor for her renewed commitment to this work. We worked together overnight to secure many assurances and a signed agreement, which we will circulate to the public, to improve the program and outcomes at once through a number of additional mechanisms: training, reporting, adherence to an evidence-based VI model. We'll be forming an advisory team to assist in these improvements and make sure they are sustainable over time. This agreement between the executive and myself gives the committee confidence in the executive's commitment to the successful implementation of violence interruption and complementary programming at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. The agreement with the executive outlines assurances regarding the violence interruption program requirements, reporting requirements, implementation and oversight, government coordination, and benchmarking. The implementation of these agreed upon assurances, I believe, will set ones on a pathway to more success. Additionally, the committee fully commits to working with Councilmember Bonds and Chairman Mendelson to return the Pathways program to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. This amendment also makes some necessary shifts in our original proposal in order to balance the budget. While we are very proud, frankly, of the funds we were able to identify and invest, there are still many gaps that the council has to work together to fill once this budget gets to the full body. For instance, victim services needs an additional $6.4 million to reach their baseline that the DC Victims Assistance Network calculates as the minimum they need to continue operations. Access to justice still faces significant gaps to deliver needed services to district residents. The Office of Attorney General still needs $6.7 million to lift their spending authority for the litigation support fund that was reduced to $11 million. And this is really to carry forward the basic functions of their office on behalf of the city. And so as we take this vote today, I want to thank my colleagues for all of your engagement and thoughts on how we can move forward in a way that best serves district residents and that honors all of the hard work that's gone into setting up the violence interruption programs, the people who do this important work every day, and the lives that can be saved if we do this really well. And so that is my commitment to all of you to not give up on that work, and my expectation from the executive to carry forward the assurances that we signed. With that, before we take the vote, is there any discussion on today's report?
Madam Chair.
Councilor Bonds?
Thank you very much, Chairwoman, for this amendment. I think it's really necessary, and I believe that, well, one, since the beginning of the city has had and maintained high hopes and goals of attainment for this program that is at the point of concern this morning, and that is the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. You've spoken to the principles and the goals. They're very difficult to obtain, as we have seen over a period of years, but we continue to work on it because we must work on it. You know, these are our people. and our people in the various neighborhoods. And I'm going to speak from the heart for a minute because I think some of our players are in the audience today. And we want you to know that we're totally committed to you. But what does that really mean in your life journey as you are trying to move forward and be a part of all of our society? It means that you have to work with us, and we have to know that you're going to work with us. We sit here doling out money, we hope, money that's going to give you a brighter future. But we have requirements like anything else. Remember the days when you were early school and you had to sit down when they said sit down and what have you, and you had to open your reader and what have you. My point is there are requirements. And we want you to fulfill the requirements. Why? Because we had to fulfill the requirements. That's how society really works. And in doing so, it means that the diligent work that you're engaged in is very, very important. You can make a big difference in community, helping others to live a less violent lifestyle. And that's why we cherish this program and want to make sure that all of the pieces are there that will help you have an improved life and help the community to improve. So that's what this is about. My colleagues are going to talk about, the individual pieces, I'm sure, but I just wanted to put that on the record and to say that the program requirements that we have before us today that are under consideration in this amendment are very substantial, and it has my support. I'm particularly happy that we are saying we're going to have something, that thing called reporting requirements. It also speaks to the kind of reports and the information that's needed in the reports. You may have done a lot of oral reporting in the past, but you're also going to write something so that we have it memorialized, the information that is collected in and through the work that you do. And there are benchmarks, and I hope that you'll come up to the benchmarks. Most importantly, I'd like for you, as you're working in this program, to also see yourself moving from the program, because you've done a good job, to an apprenticeship so that you can go on and have a career and the rest of your life. That's the goal of this program, ultimately. So I thank you very much, Chairwoman. I just thought, since we had special guests here, that I would like to acknowledge them. And I'm sure my colleague, the creator of the program, is sitting there, and he's got some real words for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bonds. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember McDuffie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you and your team for all the work that you all have invested in this process. This has been an extraordinarily challenging budget process, both from a time perspective, given the crunch, but also from a resource perspective, right? The budget has fewer resources financially than we've seen in the past, which means a lot of cuts were proposed in the mayor's original budget, and some of them continue in the various committee budget markups that are happening this week. And so I know you and your team have put a lot of time and effort into this process. And I also want to thank our budget office, our general counsel's office, and the support staff for everything that they've put into this process as well, and will continue to do as we work towards our final budget vote to the end of July. But I appreciate the modifications that you've made in the amendment that you've put on the table, given where we were yesterday with the proposed budget and the elimination of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And I think it's appropriate if it's okay to give folks a little history that I know the folks on the dais are familiar with, but I think it's important for the public to know that Way back in 2015, I was chairing the Judiciary Committee, and there was a number of homicides. We saw a spike in violent crime, and it led into some of what was happening in the beginning of 2016. And this council passed the Neighborhood Engagement Achieves Results Act, or the NEAR Act for short, which was a comprehensive public health-based approach to violence prevention and intervention in the District of Columbia. It really ushered in a new way of addressing some of the violence that we've seen in the city, and it got widespread support. Unfortunately, though, it did not initially get the support from the executive on implementation. And even though it was a data-driven, evidence-based model, we didn't get the funding in the initial budget after this bill was passed. But it was a bill that had around 20+ titles and subtitles, including the establishment of the Office of Violence Prevention and Health Equity that never got properly funded, never got properly implemented. The DC auditor has raised that as a fact. It also created the community crime prevention teams. It created the community policing working group. It created the establishment of the reestablishment of the Comprehensive Homicide Elimination Strategy Task Force. It put in place the Police Community Relations Survey. It addressed a host of issues. And one of the things that stood out, that was one of the more controversial things, was the creation of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We have thought through the narratives about some of the folks saying we're going to be paying criminals not to commit crime, and we got to a place where finally people understood that this model, whatever you call it, of preventing crime, whether it is a cure violence model or other models, works. It's worked in Richmond, California. It's worked in Oakland, California. It's worked in Chicago. It's worked through the ROCA model in Boston, Massachusetts. There's evidence that this works. We've seen some of it work through the Cure the Streets program in the Office of the Attorney General. And it's important to sort of make sure that people understand that, and I appreciate the indulgence to be able to put that on the record. The Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement does a number of things. One of the things that it's supposed to do is implement violence prevention strategies. It has not always been successful in doing that. You know that. Councilmember Charles Allen, as the previous chair of the Judiciary Committee, knows that. I know that. I don't think the budget is putting in place everything that is needed to get that office to do what is required of the law. I know you have an agreement, and I haven't gone through it yet, but I'm really pleased that you've taken an opportunity to really push the executive on this front, and look forward to working with you to continue to push harder to get them to implement what has been envisioned in the NEAR Act and what has been passed in the law. But it shouldn't be necessary, frankly, because the law it has the tools for this to be done, and we see it being done in the Office of the Attorney General. I do want to say this. Part of what the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement has done, and I think, frankly, a bright spot for that office, is the Pathways Program. And Councilmember Bonds is right. We've been joined by a number of people who have gone through or are going through the Pathways Program. They have had numerous cohorts successfully complete the Pathways Program. Guess what? It doesn't mean that some of them don't recidivate. What it means, though, is most of them don't. And they've developed a bond and a brotherhood that has allowed them to really lean on each other for support to make sure that they are steering clear of violations of the law and instead being productive members of our society. And I wanted to recognize them as well. What I also want to recognize is that it's not just a jobs program. It's not a program that should be sent to the Department of Employment Services. Rather, it's a program that should remain in the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And I want to work with you, Councilmember Bonds and Chairman Mendelson and colleagues to make sure that we restore that program to the ONE's office and fully fund that program to the levels that it was funded at previously without any cuts, because I think it's vitally important that this program continue, because it's not just a jobs program. It is a program that aims to modify behavior. is a program that supports through food support, through transportation support, through trauma-informed counseling support. It is a program that, in essence, is about changing lives. And the gentlemen in here know that, and I think some of the folks on the dais understand that fully. I want to ask some questions, Madam Chair, if that's okay, because the amendment, while helpful, doesn't shed as much light on the work that you all have done with the Budget Office to restore some of the things to what we're voting on today. And so if it's okay, I'd love to ask a couple of questions to clarify a few things. In the amendment, it restores the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and it said it funds ones at $21.1 million in FY26 and recurring with growth rate across the financial plan. If you could share with us, what was the ones office funded at in fiscal year 2025 as approved for fiscal year 2025?
We'll pull the 2025 numbers. The 2026 proposal from the mayor had funded the ones office at 23.4 million.
Okay, and is that less than
And-
what was the 2025 approved
Yes,
budget?
last year was 25.7 million.
Okay, 25.7.
But
And-
if I may, we did work with the mayor and the budget office to, over the last couple of hours, to make sure that the reductions reflect a ability for the agency to continue operating at full service. So, there are reductions in things like office supplies or contracts that hadn't been gone out, things like that. So we did so with a very careful scalpel.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to just make sure that it's clear that it's still, despite the efforts, and largely because of the proposal of the mayor, it is funded at $20.1 million. In terms of the violence intervention grants, it says it includes $10.4 million in violence intervention grants. What is the source of the $10.4 million?
So because the initial proposal had zeroed out the ones budget, we had to find all of the money to put back together the 21 million only from things the committee had recommended enhancing because we couldn't get additional cuts certified last night. So we cobbled that together through a series of things that are all included in the amendment. We basically, if we made enhancements to items, we made less of an enhancement. So we took some of that from the relativity funding that we had provided for the Office of Attorney General. We took some of that from the Cure the Streets funding that we had restored because that had been previously zeroed out. We took some of that from the Access to Justice enhancement we provided and the Victim Services enhancement provided, and we took all of the enhancement we provided to the Safe Commercial Corridors grant.
Okay, and with respect to the hospital-based violence intervention program, which was also included in the original NEAR Act, and was one of the programs that was implemented early on in the executive, and so I want to credit them for that. It says the transfer of the hospital-based violence intervention program to ones from the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, recognizing a savings of $750,000 due to historical underspending on grants in previous years. The transfer of that program to ones, what's the rationale behind transferring that program to ones? Because it seemed like it was working successfully as it was with OVSJG.
Sure. So a couple of things there. One, per your introduced legislation to merge the violence interruption programs, as well as what I have been working on for the last year and a half to merge these programs, if we're going to reconstitute ones, as you all asked me to do, I think it is important to move forward with a merged program so we can really have the efficacy that we all want to see in that shared infrastructure. And that means making sure that the hospital-based violence interruption grant also comes under one house so they can be connected. So for those who are unfamiliar with hospital-based violence interruption, we need that information. If someone comes in the hospital with a gunshot, we need those VI workers to be working not just with that that victim. But with folks on the ground, if there's information they can share to prevent a retaliatory shooting, that's kind of core to what VI does. And so that's why we thought it was more appropriate to pull in-house to ones. The savings came from unspent money that has been there for the last several years. So they had been allocated 2.8 million, and for the last several years, 750,000 of that was completely unspent. So we did not think that was a good use of council resources. We reduced that by only the amount that was unspent the last several years, and that's how we got the 2.1 million that we transferred over.
Got it. So I do, and I appreciate you mentioned the legislation that I introduced to merge our violence prevention programs. I do believe that it should be merged. To me, it's the conditions under which we merge them and the transition period and what happens in terms of the communication, both between the mayor and the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the deputy mayor for Public Safety and Justice, and the Office of the Attorney General. And so I want to just ask, and I'm coming to the end of my questions, Madam Chair, if you bear with me. The Pathways program, what was the FY25 approved budget? What was the mayor's proposed budget in 26? And what was the amount transferred to SEAL? And if you can also share the FTEs for those corresponding years, I would appreciate that.
Sure. So first, to your point about the transition, that is part of the agreement with the mayor that we've set up an advisory team that has myself or the chair of this committee, the mayor and the attorney general, and a designee of all those people serving on this. And so that was part of the analysis to make sure that the expertise of Cure the Streets can be incorporated. In terms of pathways.
So FY25 approved FTEs and budget?
Sure. So FY 2025, pathways was 7.6 million. I will note that was a big increase than what it was in FY 2024, which we're still funding it at higher than FY 24 levels. But 2025 did have a major increase, 7.6.
And how many FTEs?
25 FTEs.
Okay.
Then the FY 26 proposal, the mayor had $6.7 million.
Okay.
Before
And
this,
how many FTEs?
I think also 25.
Okay.
Also 25. So before today, what our proposal was, because there was no longer going to be a ones, we really wanted to make sure that we protected pathways. And so we explored a number of different agencies to send it to. None of them were really the right fit. And so we sent it to the Department of Employment Services with the understanding with Councilmember Bonds and the city administrator and DOES that it would be properly protected and managed. We sent $4.5 million, which was based on our assessment at the time of things that were budgeted in the Pathways budget that were not core to the mission. That is no longer totally relevant now because last night we worked with the mayor's budget office to re-come up with a Pathways budget that maintains all of the support services and the programs for Pathways, but identifies additional savings like in things like office supplies and contractual services for things unrelated to Pathways that have been budgeted there. And so that total number now is 4.9 million. So what the committee is proposing today is that we have 400,000 for Pathways. And after we get through today's markup, we'll work with Councilmember Bonds and Chairman Mendelson to move the rest of the 4.5 million back into ones. And so that total budget will be 4.9 million.
And how many FTEs? Because I believe yesterday when I voted, or maybe it was Monday when we voted at SEAL, it was $4.5 million transferred in from Judiciary and 19 FTEs. Is that correct? So how many FTEs? Will we restore the full amount of FTEs to 25?
Yes, my understanding is the new proposal will have 25 FTEs, but we'll confirm.
So I'm gonna obviously continue to work with you. I know this is one of the things I identified as an area where I want to make sure that I can work with you as chair and colleagues. I've already talked to the chairman about this as well, and I mentioned it to Councilmember Bonds as chair of the SEAL committee because I am concerned about the reduction in funding from $6.7 million as proposed in FY26, but $7.6 million approved by FY25 to ultimately $4.9 million. That is significant reduction in funding for a program that I think it's hard to argue with the success. And I would love to get this program fully funded to make sure that they can get as many cohorts through the program and get them the training, the supports that they need, the services that they need to be successful so that we can do a better job at preventing violence in the District of Columbia. So that's one of the areas I want to work with you all on. Just so the last couple of things I want to talk about is the Office of the Attorney General. While I believe deeply that the violence prevention work in the District of Columbia has not lived up to its promise, I believe that has been the case because of a failure to communicate and to administer the law, that is the NEAR Act, appropriately and with the spirit and intent behind the bill. I think the Office of the Attorney General has attempted to do that. And we've seen better outcomes, and I believe the data supports that we've seen better outcomes in the work that they're doing implementing the Cure Violence model, which is a part of the NEAR Act. And so to eliminate the Cure the Streets program, which was not your proposal, which is actually an executive branch proposal, I want to acknowledge, to me, sets the violence prevention work in the District of Columbia back by at least a decade. And I think it's important to be able to work with you and the chairman to restore funding to the 6 programs that the Office of the Attorney General has the capacity and willingness to implement so that we don't lose the work that they are doing and that we don't have to cut 90 jobs associated with people who are depending on both the income, but also who are performing the life-saving work that's happening through that program. Does every contractor get everything right? No. But I don't think we can say that for MPD. I don't think we can say that for OUC. I don't think we can say that for the Office of Tax and Revenue. There's unfortunately, I think throughout the history of government, there's going to be instances of fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's our job to ferret it out and to prosecute it and hold the people accountable, but we should not jettison a program that has demonstrated success, particularly where you have an office that has leaned all the way into this work. And I know you know this, and this is not about your work as chair so much as it is really a call to action by the executive to work with this council to be able to implement the Cure the Streets program, and for us to be able to identify and work with the chairman the funding necessary to restore the 6 programs sites that are being implemented in the Office of the Attorney General, and to work to restore the litigation support fund, as well as identify the funding for the child support TANF pass-through that they've requested. So I will stop there. I really appreciate the opportunity to put this on the record and how hard you all have worked to get us to this point, which I think is the right direction that we need to be going in to restore the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement. And I think ultimately, though, we need to work with the chairman to fully restore the things that I've outlined. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilmember McDuffie. And I really want to thank you for your many years of work on this important issue and look forward to working together to yield the outcomes that residents deserve and we know are possible. I do want to just note that we did retain the funding for the TANF pass-through, even in this amendment. Councilmember Felder?
Thank you, Chairperson Pinto. Good morning, members of the committee. First and foremost, I just want to commend you and members of your team for all the hard work that has gone into making amendments to this committee report. I know that it has been an arduous task, but I appreciate your willingness and commitment to working with the Budget Office, the Executive Office of the Mayor, and members of this committee to get it right. As a Ward 7 council member, I remain extremely committed to developing and strengthening new policies, programs, and measures to improve the overall public safety ecosystem of the District of Columbia, but particularly in Ward 7, which is why I was excited to see that your recommendations included public safety investments in the areas to provide additional pathways to join MPD, increase in paying for our 911 and 311 call takers and dispatchers. Additionally, while I understand that there's been some concerns with the performance of the agency, I was pleased to see your recommendations included amendments to return the Pathways programs to the one's office, taking a page out of our colleague Anita Bonds. I too want to speak from the heart. I had an opportunity to talk directly to the last cohort of the Pathways program, and having conversations with those young men really affirms the work that I do. I think oftentimes, especially in a city like this, we know our young folks are going to make a mistake. And during the conversation, I emphasize that one mistake should not define who you are as an individual. And just to even enroll in the Pathways program really signals a willingness to want to get it right. To my colleague McDuffie's point, he mentioned that this is not just a workforce program. It's more of a signal and a violence intervention hub that demonstrates that the city is invested in you. And as your council member, I think about many of the stories that I've heard. And the reality is, there's no difference between my story and most of the stories that individuals who go through the Pathway program. The only difference is somebody was willing to invest in me. So my commitment as a council member is to invest in this program. That's why I commend members of this committee and the chairperson for fighting to make sure we save Pathways. I will not beat a dead horse. Councilmember McDuffie asked a bunch of the questions that I had as it relates to some of the funding mechanisms within the committee of the whole. And I would just say that I look forward to working with the chairperson and the rest of my council colleagues to try to find additional funding for the legal support fund within the OAG. And once again, thank you, chairperson, and I appreciate the work that this committee has done.
Well, thank you so much, Councilor Felder. And I know I haven't slept in a couple days, but I hope I don't look like a dead horse. But I appreciate your partnership. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Councilor Pinto. And I don't believe Councilor Felder was referencing you as the dead horse. I think he was just talking about the issue. So I want to make sure I speak up for my colleague here. I do want to ask that our comments be recorded in the committee report that gets revised here. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about my reactions, and then I do have several questions I wanted to ask to make sure we understand what's in this and what's being proposed to be changed from what yesterday. When I look and think about where we were 24 hours ago, in particular with our Pathways program, I'll be very blunt. I think that recommending moving the Pathways program to DOES as a jobs program is a fundamental misunderstanding of what our Pathways program is. I have met with many of our cohorts that have gone through. I've joined the celebration and graduation of many of our cohorts. It is so much more than a jobs program, and no shade to DOES, but I don't trust DOES to run the type of program that Pathways is. So I think it's crucially important that an entity like an Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement understands much more clearly and better what our Pathways program is, how important it is, who we are trying to work with, and frankly, who is the person that steps up to choose to be a part of the Pathways program. So I am very glad that that was one of the driving actions, I think, in the last 12 hours or so that has moved back, and I think that is the right step. Obviously, there's still some details to work out, but I think that that is a crucially important step. I I do have some questions I want to try to ask and understand what's happening, because I do think people can be forgiven for having a little bit of whiplash from 24 hours ago, going from a committee report that says the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement needs to be dissolved to now saying it is what we will reconstitute and everything will now go into it. So some of the funding seems to be going back, but I did have a series of questions, Madam Chair, to make sure I can understand what it is we're moving back and how it supports moving forward. So from the question of the central staff and funding, are all the VI staff being reassigned and brought back into the one's office? Are all the FTEs and positions moving back?
So I guess I'd say in terms of the whiplash or the change here, that is because we're part of a legislative body. I had a proposal. You all asked me to change it and did not support that proposal. And so we re-envisioned something that would be workable to try to be collaborative. And in so doing, made a series of assurances with the mayor that will address, I hope, many of the challenges that I've laid out in the committee report that I've had with the one's office. And so that is, as you know, is part of what's happened in the last day. In terms of pathways, I totally hear you on DOES being the wrong place for it. We shopped around a lot of different departments and agencies that it could exist, and nothing was the right fit. And it didn't make sense to us in the earlier version to just have an agency that only did pathways when we were making those other moves. But in this structure, I'm glad that pathways is returning to the one's office. So in terms of the violence interruption kind of section at the one's office, the staff will be returned. The total funding for that section will be increased in the total number, but that's inclusive of the hospital-based violence interruption program that's moving over. In terms of FTE specifically, it's maintained, is the exact same number.
Okay, thank you. And is that across all of the one's office, or is that for the VI program?
That's for the VI program. There are all of ones. Yeah. Okay. All of the FTEs are maintained. But there are some slight reductions in the other sections that we did very laser focused with the executive and the budget office to make sure that it doesn't undermine the core functions and programming.
Yeah, what I want to make sure was that from a staffing perspective, obviously you need people who can be there to administer the grants and do the work. So the FTEs are being restored there.
Yes.
Are there, I'll come back to that in a second. You referenced the agreement that I think you and over the last 12 hours or so have with the mayor. Is that supposed to be, is that a plan for a merger? How would you describe what that agreement is?
So there have been other times since I've been on the council that I have signed agreements with the mayor and her team to indicate our shared commitment to work on an issue. We did this with the Aston, which is a transitional housing model, to talk about how the program is going to run effectively. And that now is our guiding document to make this what I believe the most successful transitional housing program in the city in Ward 2. This agreement similarly is meant to be a guiding document that is incorporated in today's record. So everybody is on the same page of what we are seeking to accomplish. This is not just something we drew up last night. This has been circulated. Drafts of this were shared months ago when we initially proposed the violence interruption merger. It's had input of CBOs, of experts, of dozens of people that we've worked with over the last several months to make sure that these types of elements will inform the success of ones. Because I don't believe if everything stays as according to it's been going, that's sufficient. We have to make some changes to make sure that these programs are being effective. And so this agreement is an agreement between us and the executive about those changes, whether it be reporting requirements, benchmarking, this new advisory team to be established.
But it's not going to be in statute, correct? Like this is an agreement, like we have no force of law if any parties don't live up to this agreement, correct?
Right, this is not a new law. We can't get something certified with that time crunch, but this is my expectation and the expectation of the committee that this agreement will be honored and has been signed by the city administrator and the deputy mayor. And I have agreement with the mayor that she will honor this agreement and be increasingly engaged in the success and operations of ONES.
Okay. I just want to make it clear to the public, like this, while there could be some really good elements that are in this agreement, it's not going to have the force of law. It's not in statute. And what I'm concerned about is this isn't a merger, right? The funding for the Attorney General and Cure the Streets will not be here in this. So there are about 90 people who work in Cure the Streets, and they will all lose their job in a couple of months. This city has done that before, a couple of decades ago, with devastating effect, where it walked away from the individuals and the communities where violence prevention and violence intervention worked, was in the community, and it just stopped. I think it's a broken promise to those 90 individuals who are in the community, and I think what's in front of us is not a merger, because there is no Cure the Streets program that's moving over under this proposal to the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement. It just stops. And I think that will have very damaging effects in our city. So I want to be careful when we use the word merger around that. I think it's going to fracture trust within vulnerable populations. And again, I think it's going to do damage. Is the intent to modify the committee report language about the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement? Because again, I think we're all experiencing a bit of whiplash where the report outlined why the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement needed to be dissolved and removed, but the amendment we're looking at now reconstitutes the ONES office. So I didn't see within the amendment anything around changing the report language. Is your intent to change the report language around that so that it reflects what the committee may be doing today?
Sure. So just for everybody's reminder, when this committee received the mayor's budget proposal, the OAG has this fund called the Litigation Support Fund, and that's how they fund Cure the Streets. That was zeroed out, the mayor's budget proposal. So part of how we restored that funding was when we moved the violence interruption funding from Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. Where we were yesterday, after you all asked me to reconstitute ONES, the only options on the table were to take money that we had already enhanced. So I had restored and then some, all of the money for Cure the Streets to expand that program to additional sites. That the OAG said they could not manage all the VI programs in the city, and you all did not want to proceed in that way. And so with those limited options, I then used the Cure the Streets funding to help put back together the ONES office. So that's just kind of the reality. And I tried to make clear to you all that those were the options on the table. I'm sorry, I forgot my second point.
Question I was asking is, the committee report
Oh, yes.
spends a lot of time talking about
Thank
how you
you.
want to dissolve the ONES office. Is the committee report going to be changed and amended
Thank you.
to reflect what may happen here?
Yes, absolutely. So procedurally today, we're moving an amendment. But after we get through today, we will incorporate all of this discussion. And when we take the vote, I will ask for leave to make editorial and other changes, and we will provide an update so that the report lays out why we are moving forward in the way we are with the ONES office. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I will also note, I've actually had several of our colleagues that aren't on this committee have been asking for copies of this amendment, because obviously I think all members of the council are following closely what's happening here. I don't think this has been shared with our other colleagues. So can your staff send that around to the other members? 'Cause
Absolutely.
They
No
seem to be
problem.
asking for that. Okay. I want to talk for a second about the hospital-based violence intervention programs. I am very concerned about moving this. This wasn't what was in front of us yesterday. So this is a decision last night to move these. This morning, we've heard from the leadership of Cedar Hill, of Children's, University of Maryland, and MedStar, all that they strongly oppose this move, and they believe it needs to stay at OVSJG. These are programs that very much focus on victim services and legal professional community. It's not a ones program. And I'm very concerned about that. I'd actually like to make an oral amendment to reduce the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement Violence Intervention grants line by $750,000 recurring and transfer that back to the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants to reconstitute the hospital-based violence intervention program at that agency. We've heard from the leadership of, again, Cedar Hill, MedStar, Children's, University of Maryland. They do not support this move to the ONES office. And I think it would be important that we continue the work that's happening there and have it be housed in OVSJG.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me just kind of explain to colleagues a couple things. One, the funding amount is not 750,000, it's 2.1 million. That's what we've moved in. So I don't support the amendment either way, but I don't think it would make sense to split it up in that way. Two, the hospital-based violence interruption program is something very important, and I think that is a vital part of this ecosystem. Just so folks know, as a general matter, this will work if somebody, let's say, is victimized by a shooting and comes into a hospital and that hospital has hospital-based violence interrupter. They can work with that victim to help connect them to resources and understand what the circumstances were of that shooting. We have had a lot of problems over the last couple of years getting resource connection and information flow between the violence interrupters on the street and the violence interrupters in the hospitals. And I continue to believe that this is important work, but we have to stay laser focused to do it better and to do it in a more coordinated fashion. And so I think that it is most appropriate and responsible to move forward with having the hospital-based violence interruption program out of one so that we can have the benefit of that shared expertise and infrastructure. That was part of all of your argument about why we need to have pathways in ones, because it's a particular type of skill set that folks in this program are utilizing. Similarly with the hospital-based violence interrupters, it's not, yes, it is victim services, but there's a lot of victim services that goes on with ones, because as we know, sometimes it's a similar population who may be victimized by a shooting or may have perpetrated a shooting. And so we will be able to better serve this population and hopefully drive down gun violence if we have that coordinated approach. I also want colleagues to know, if you're going to vote on this amendment, that what you would be doing in practice is reducing the total funding amount for what we are spending on violence interruption out of the ONES office, which I don't think is the right thing to do or the right message to send, or from what I've heard from all of you, what you wanted to do over the last couple of days.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Here, so in this amendment, so we don't have tables or charts with this amendment, right? So you just said it was $2.1 million, but this amendment says transfer hospital-based violence intervention program to ONES from OVSJG, recognizing savings of $750,000. Later on, it says you're moving recommended enhancement to victim services grants at OVSJG to 2.1 million. What is it, 2.1 million or 750? Because the amendment says 750.
It's 2.1 million. The first reference you made said recognizing savings of 750 because the total was 2.8 million. But the transfer is of 2.1 million.
Well, then I would amend my amendment to the 2.1, but this again is the issue of, this wasn't even in the budget in front of us yesterday, and now overnight, we're now moving a whole nother program out of OVSJG, and we have the leadership of all the hospitals that do this work telling us, don't do this, it's the wrong idea.
I mean, yeah, I'd say that's the unprecedented nature of all of our colleagues not wanting to proceed with the committee report that we had before us yesterday. But we took the unprecedented step to accommodate for what you all asked me to do, which was put together an agency basically out of thin air over 12 hours. So we did it, we accomplished it. I'm extremely grateful for the work of the budget office. No, there are not updated tables right now because they only had a couple of hours. Those will be received when they're ready. But we cannot, in my view, and I want colleagues who are considering this to hear this. And hello, you all. A little confab? No, because I think this is really important. There are problems with our violence interruption program in the city. We all know that, right? So we can't just cover our eyes and say, let's just keep doing things the exact way that it's been going and hope that things improve. That's not going to work. So I've agreed to reconstitute this agency because you all asked me to do so with the commitments from the executive, but we have to move forward slightly differently. And that means merging the programs and having real efficiency and metrics. And that includes our hospital-based violence interruption network. How can we expect somebody to prevent a retaliatory shooting from a victim of gun violence in a hospital if there's not shared infrastructure to say, here's how you can communicate with someone on the ground to protect yourself? And or to be moved to a hotel to be kept safe, or
Madam Chair,
outside of law enforcement. That's the whole point of the violence interruption network.
and what you're describing is very different than the hospital-based violence prevention programs. You're describing very different programs that are the ones run through Cure the Streets, through ONSE. The hospital-based violence intervention program is a very different thing than what you just described. It's very different. And again, the leadership of the hospitals that do this work are saying, don't do this. Could I ask the budget director just to help clarify what the funding is that's moved, just so we can get a little clarity on that? Because again, with no tables and charts, it's really hard to understand what's being proposed to be moved.
Good morning, Councilmember Allen, members of the committee. There's currently a grant at OVSJG of 2.8 million for the hospital-based violence intervention program. What the committee is proposing to do is to take that grant, that 2.8 million, transfer the 2.8 million, the amount, to ones. And with the 2.1 million of it would be used to provide that grant out of ones. And the remainder, approximately 750,000, would be used to basically balance the ones office.
Okay. Madam Budget Director, is this amendment, has the budget office certified the changes in this?
No.
Okay. I guess I made a motion, so I guess, Madam Chair, if I can ask that we move in that motion, but my ask would be, so if I can amend my oral amendment, is then for the full amount, which if I'm correct, Budget Director Budoff, it was the 2.1 or it was the 2.8?
So there is 2.8 million that was transferred between the two agencies. I had a conversation last night with the mayor's budget director, who indicated that the grant over the past few years had not been fully expended. I have not personally verified that. My office has not personally verified that. This was information given to me by a trusted source, that they underspend that contract every year. So her recommendation, the mayor's budget office, her recommendation to Councilmember Pinto was that there could be some savings derived from that grant, and that grant could, or the services underneath that grant could be provided at the same level at approximately 2.1.
Okay. Then thank you. So then I would amend my oral amendment to 2.1 million. And again, I think supporting what we're hearing from the leadership of the hospitals that are doing this work, that'd be my amendment.
Sure, no problem. And I would just add, we've also heard from a lot of people on the ground who know that there can be improvements to the work because they haven't been able to get the information. We're trying to save lives here, and I think this will help. But yes, we can absolutely call for a vote. Let's do a voice vote. All those in favor of Councilmember Allen's oral amendment to
Can I
the
do a roll
oral
call?
amendment to,
Can I do a roll call, please, Madam Chair?
Sure. We'll do a roll call vote. The vote is on Councilmember's oral amendment to the oral amendment to block the transfer of 2.1 million from the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants of hospital-based violence interruption into the one's office. Councilmember Allen?
Yes.
Councilmember Bonds?
No.
Councilmember Felder?
No.
Councilmember McDuffie?
Yes.
And I am a no. The vote fails on a 2-3 vote.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to spend a second, because we haven't talked much about the OAG's office, but I think, and again, accurately you noted, some of the cuts to the CURE program, for example, was certainly being from the executive branch that came down. But my understanding is there's funds that are being removed from the litigation support fund between the mayor's proposal and the proposal that's in front of us today. Could you outline what's being removed from the litigation support fund?
Sure. So no, we are not taking any additional money from litigation support fund that the mayor put in. The committee had recommended yesterday to add $3 million for the relativity costs, which is the database that OAG manages to pursue litigation, and $6.039 million for their Cure the Streets program. Both of those enhancements can no longer move forward because we had to use them to reconstitute ones.
Okay. all right.
Anything that was left over in the litigation support fund from the mayor's proposal is maintained, plus the TANF pass-through that we provided, plus about $3 million over the financial plan in fiscal year 27, 28, and 29 to address their relativity concerns.
Got it. Okay. So the reductions from what the draft we saw yesterday.
Yes.
Okay. I still am concerned with that. All right. I know we spent a lot of our time just on a couple of agencies. Obviously, this committee has a lot of other agencies that are crucial and important, and they're not getting a whole lot of attention in their conversation. But I do want to note, I am concerned about, for example, Department of Forensic Sciences and some of the cuts that are taking place there in the mayor's proposed budget. So I am concerned overall. I want to acknowledge, respect, and thank that I know that you and your team have been up all night working on trying to make changes. So I don't want that to go unnoticed or unacknowledged. I know that you're trying to be responsive to what you heard yesterday and trying to make changes. I am very concerned, though, that overnight we've gone to now completely changing how we do our hospital-based violence intervention program. And the way I'm hearing it described is very different than the way that it works. I am concerned about the reductions of what would have been resources going to other parts of making sure that our public safety system was working. I'm concerned that the amendment that we have in front of us doesn't have tables or charts to understand where funding is coming from, nor is it even certified. And so that makes me very anxious about what we have in front of us to even be able to vote on it. Even with our Pathways program moving back to Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement, it sounds like it's a $2 million or roughly $2 million cut to our Pathways program. I'm concerned about that. I think given the very quick shifting over the last 12 hours of where things are has led to a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration over exactly where things are. That doesn't take away from a lot of work that went into it, but I think that it leaves a lot to be it's not well understood what we are voting on, and from the budget office, it's not even certified. I would recommend the best course of action at this point would be that we, rather than we rushing through trying to make these changes back and forth, that we not support this. And in fact, we just spend the next couple of weeks working with the chairman, working with Chair Pinto, working with our colleagues to help put this together in a way that I think achieves our shared and mutual goals. But I just can't see this being the best path forward. And again, it's not from a lack of effort that I know that you and your team put in, but I just can't support this proposal today and put my name next to a vote that reduces funding for our Pathways program, that reduces our CURE program and has 90 folks that are going to lose their jobs, that moves a hospital-based violence program that isn't going to work. I think that this will ultimately not work towards our city's goals and moving us forward with that public safety and gun violence in mind. So, Madam Chair, I can't support the proposal today. I certainly hope that we can work over the next several weeks to be able to move forward. I just getting word that Howard University Hospital just called all our offices saying that they oppose this shift of hospital-based violence program. So we got every hospital out there telling us this is the wrong decision. And yet we're going to vote for it. I just don't think that's a good idea. And so I can't support this proposal today. Certainly look forward to working with my colleagues if this passes on trying to knit it all back together again at the full cow. But I'm frustrated with where we are, and I think the damage it can do to a lot of these really core and crucial programs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Allen. And of course, I'm sorry to hear that, but totally understand. You've got to do what you've got to do. To your point about there being confusion, I am happy to answer any questions anyone has about this budget. I know this was changed because you all asked me to change it, but we are trying to do so in the clearest way possible with what options had on the table. But I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And I hope that other colleagues feel good about a lot of the other great things that we're doing in this budget. Enhancements to access to justice and victim services, removing tort liability reform that would limit victims' rights to recover even if the government injured them. Dozens of investments that we're making in programs that work across the city and that residents across all 8 wards have been asking for. And so I feel really proud of this budget. Admittedly, it is not the budget I planned to present yesterday, but I'm one lawmaker out of 12 at the moment. And this is a collaborative process. I continue to learn from all of you. I continue to receive feedback from folks how we can do better. And so I'm proud of what we're presenting today that accommodates a lot of the concerns that you all and others raised about our draft yesterday. That's what we do best as lawmakers is engage in an iterative process. So is this budget perfect? No, but I hope people are proud of how your voices have made a difference in what we're voting on today. And I did my best to accommodate those requests, and I'm going to do my best to work with the mayor and the one's office and all of our agencies as I do in this entire cluster every day to be the best partner I can to achieve the best results, because I really believe everyone in the district deserves to be safe, and I know that we can do so. Councilmember Felder?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted the record to reflect that I too am deeply committed to finding funds to support the work of the Cure the Streets. I know that there's 6 sites. My goal is to get it back to 10. But in this budget process, working with members of the council doing the cow to try to find funding to support the work of the Cure the Streets and, as we mentioned before, Pathways. So I just wanted the record to reflect that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Felder. Councilmember McDuffie, second.
I'd also want the record to reflect that this is a very collaborative effort, and my vote today is not a vote in complete endorsement of what is before us. I think it's important to state. What it is a vote in support of you as chair of the committee, understanding based on the conversations that we've had over the last 48 hours that you are committed to working with me, even where we may not agree 100% on what this budget does, to try to work through some of those challenges with the chairman at the committee of the whole. This budget doesn't do what I like to see it do with respect to the Pathways program, with respect to our hospital-based violence intervention program, in a number of areas that I've already gone through. But I want it to be clear to the public and to you that it is not a complete endorsement of what we're voting on so much as it is a belief that this is a collaborative effort and that you and your team have been collaborative to get us to this point, and that you will continue that collaboration, I have no doubt, to work through some of the existing challenges. And so I appreciate the position that you're in, and I look forward to working with you, and I know and believe that you will work with me and others, even in areas where we may not 100% agree, to do, I think, is in the best interest of public safety in the District of Columbia. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McDuffie. And that is absolutely my shared commitment to continue working with you and all of our colleagues to make sure that we get the best outcomes possible. So I really appreciate that.
Madam
Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Buttons?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that the amendment that you have presented us with, I think is a better place than we were yesterday. And I commend you for that and for listening to us, taking our concerns very seriously and working to make the ONES program a more solidly based process. I really appreciate that because we haven't given the attention that we should have given over the years, but we're very focused now. And you've got full commitment of your committee to step with you and trying to realize the objectives that you've laid before us. There are some things that we will not agree with, but I'm from the school of let's see with any planned improvement whether or not it works. And I'm hoping that we're committed to doing that as well. You know, we can tear a plan apart bit by bit, minute by minute, and we may still end up with a process that doesn't work. And so in earnest, I am asking us to let's trust this process that we've gone through and let's go ahead and vote and decide whether or not we're going to keep the new plan or not. And if we keep it, let's try to work with it. That's my plea to all of us. And thank you very much. And I know you haven't had much sleep, but you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles and you know that too. So, you know, thank you. Thank you very much for your very hard work on this amendment. Because most of everything else that's in this budget, we had all agreed to, as you well know. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bonds, and I much prefer a crumbling cookie to a dead horse, so we'll take it. All right, with that, is there any other discussion? Okay. I now would like to move the dais print incorporating the amendment that I moved today. We are going to have a roll call vote. I also, sorry, I want to just make sure I'm very clear with this language. I'm moving the dais print of the committee's fiscal year 2026 budget support act recommendations as amended and the committee's budget report with leave for staff to incorporate any technical, conforming, and editorial changes and reconciling changes to reflect the amendment and the discussion that we've had today in consultation with the general counsel. And the local budget act for the recommendations for fiscal year 2026. Councilmember Allen.
No.
Councilmember Bonds.
Yes.
Councilmember Felder.
Yes.
Councilmember McDuffie. And myself, Chair Pinto, is a yes. With that, the ayes have it 4-1. Okay, is there any discussion on the committee's Budget Support Act recommendations or the budget report? With the understanding that the budget report will be updated to reflect what we've discussed. Okay, I will now move both the committee's recommendations for the BSA and the dais print of the committee's budget report. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, before we adjourn, I want to thank you all again for all of your consultation in developing these budget recommendations. I want to thank my team. We've gotten to know each other quite well in the last couple of days. Just kidding. And committee staff and personal office staff who have worked extremely diligently to review the agency budgets and craft this proposal, including Lynn Groft, Kima Benjamin, Aloy Labrada, Anaya Mitchell, James Nance, Warner Dixon, Esther Bundens, Brian Romanowski, Maddie White, Samantha Manning, Hannah Ames, Caitlin Lung, Madison Santmeyer, and Genevieve Hulick. I also want to thank Zach Walter in the General Counsel's Office, Errol Spence, Joe Wolf, Ann Phelps, Jen Budoff, and Andy Eisenhower in the Council Budget Office for their invaluable expertise and guidance. And again, especially over the last couple of days, we've all really been in this thing together, as they say, and I really appreciate how positive and collaborative and how everyone has continued to remain in a good mood despite several days of not sleeping. So I promise you won't hear from me tonight. And finally, I want to thank our OCFO team, Andrew Curry, Deborah Fries, and Kevin Lang in the Office of Revenue Analysis, and David Garner, Angelique Rice, and our team of AFOs, Anthony Woby, Anthony Norman, Christine McGlowy, Dan Proudfoot, Doug Kemp, Fryawat Dresso, John Nitz, Matthew Borden, Michael Bolden, Natalie Mayers, Patrice Mason, Shelley Graham, and Thane Hune for their invaluable assistance in preparing the report. This would not be possible without all of you. And I just want to say, because there's been a lot of debate today, that my confidence and faith in all of our colleagues' genuine intentions for how to move forward has never faltered and is very clear. We can disagree up here with how to move forward, but I appreciate all of you for what you bring to this work and what you continue to inform me and all of the public who have been part of this process. When we believe in each other's intentions, we can always work together and get to the best results that our residents deserve. And so that's your continued commitment from me. This concludes this meeting of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. The time is now 11:23 a.m. and we are adjourned.